Welcome back to Power Play. Pardon me, we're going to get you a live look at the House of Commons right now. We are about 30 minutes away from a vote of non-confidence. Oh, never mind, we don't have that shot, but we will shortly. The vote was brought on by the Conservatives leader, Pierre Poilievre. It focuses on the upcoming increase to the price on carbon. It's set to go on April 1st from $65 to $80 a ton. The motion has the potential to topple this government, though it's not likely given the NDP's confidence in supply agreement with the Liberals. Before MPs vote in the House of Commons, they're in studio with us live to debate the motion and the carbon tax or price hike. Adam Van Koeverden is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Environment Minister. Andrew Scheer is the Conservatives' House Leader, and Laurel Collins is the NDP's Environment Critic. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you, and good to see you again. Thanks for joining us for this discussion. Mr. Van Koeverden, I'll start with you. There's a new report out today from the Canadian Climate Institute that talks about sort of the effectiveness in reducing emissions and reaching the target in 2030 of the industrial carbon tax versus the consumer carbon tax. They find it 3 times more effective. Given the opposition that the consumer side of the carbon tax faces from right across the country, Canadians and politicians alike, why not, given how little it is effective compared to the industrial carbon tax, just strengthen that industrial one and get the other one off the table?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that finding from the Canadian Climate Institute did not suggest that the consumer price should go away. What they said is that you need multiple ways to fight climate change and lower emissions in order to get our emissions down to the target. They highlighted all of the different methods by which our government and other governments are lowering emissions. And notably, what they said was that the price on pollution is working to lower our emissions, and it will continue to contribute to lower emissions to achieve our target in 2030. So it's part of a suite of measures. It's not a standalone measure, but it is an important part of it.
Just to follow up on that, I interviewed the author of the study today on my radio program, and I asked him exactly that. Could you do it without the consumer side of it? And he said you could. You could basically strengthen the industrial side and take into account opposition and buy-in from the public. And there are many ways basically to address achieving the goal that your government has set out. Again, given the opposition from not just Conservative premiers, who I know that your government likes to characterize as climate change deniers, but Premier Wab Kinew, the leader of the Alberta NDP, Rachel Notley, everyone vying to replace her, the leader of the Saskatchewan NDP, who actually supported breaking the law in the name of opposing the carbon tax. Why not recalibrate and just focus on something that will be more effective, according to this report?
I think the main reason is because the opposition to it that's being led by the Conservatives, by Andrew Scheer and by Pierre Poilievre, is predicated on a lie. It's predicated on the lie that pricing carbon and pricing pollution and lowering our emissions is harming Canadians economically. And that's just categorically false. And it's another finding that these reports are coming out with, that Conservatives are unfortunately using our climate plan and our emissions reduction strategy as a scapegoat for inflation and for the economic challenges that are faced by Canadians right now. We need to have a plan to fight both the affordability crisis and climate change.
So which is this? Is it income redistribution or is it reducing emissions?
Well, it's doing both, quite frankly. It's not redistributing wealth by very much, but it is important to note that the 80% of Canadians who are getting more back than they pay are the bottom 4 quintiles of Canadian earners. And it's really only people who are earning more than $250,000 on average that are having to pay more through the price on pollution than they're getting back through the Canada Carbon Rebate. The Canada Carbon Rebate has been shown over and over by economists and the PBO to send more money back to 80% of Canadians. And that's why it's good economic policy and good climate plan policy.
Mr. Scheer, the Liberals and the federal government are accusing your party of basically misrepresenting the facts in order to bolster your argument against the carbon tax. Do they have a point?
No, because they're completely wrong. And it's ridiculous for Mr. Van Koeverden to suggest that the reason why Canadians are opposed to this tax is because of rhetoric from politicians. They're opposed to the tax because they see the prices going up and they know they don't get anywhere near as much back in the rebate. Where we get our numbers from is from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And he was at committee, and I know Adam was there because I was there too. And the independent, Trudeau-appointed budget watchdog said that the majority of Canadians will be worse off. That's what he testified at committee. When you factor in all the costs. And what the Liberals have done is have a very clever but tricky aspect to this scheme where they only narrowly concentrate on one set of numbers. But as prices go up, as companies have to pay higher taxes and pass it on to consumers, as the economy suffers from this extra tax, Canadians end up paying more. And that's not conservative numbers. That's not our research team coming up with that. That's what the Parliamentary Budget Officer said himself.
But what the PBO didn't take into account in both of his analysis, both the fiscal and economic impact, was the added cost to Canadians of dealing with the effects of climate change.
Yes,
that's not
which they
part
will
of
pay
this.
too. They
no,
will
but
pay
that
those
will also
too.
cost Canadians, right? Who you're saying to
yes,
get rid
but with
of this
with the
tax.
carbon tax, they're going to pay those costs plus the carbon tax. This idea that if we have this carbon tax, there's not going to be climate change has been proven false. It's also been proven false that it's helping Canada reach its emissions targets.
That's
Under the
true.
Liberal plan, you will have the costs associated with climate change plus the carbon tax.
To be fair, though,
that's what the Parliamentary Budget Officer said. He said under both scenarios, there will be climate change effects. But with the carbon tax, you're going to pay that extra cost as well.
To be fair, what the report established today, the point I was making to Mr. Van Koeverden is it's not as effective in reducing emissions as the industrial carbon price, but it does reduce them by 2030 by 8 to 9%. Will your party keep the industrial side of the carbon tax?
The Environment Commissioner has said that this government is stacking failure on top of failure. After the last time the Liberals raised the carbon tax, Canada fell 4 spots on the Climate Change Performance Index. This idea, we need to stop talking about the carbon tax as if it's an environment plan. All it does is raise the price of everything, and Canadians fall further and further behind. That's what the Parliamentary Budget Officer says.
Will you answer quickly if you're going to keep the industrial carbon price?
Look, we're gonna have a comprehensive environment plan that our leader will unveil and release to Canadians, and they can evaluate those 2 plans. A carbon tax that raises the prices of everything, that will be quadrupled by the time Justin Trudeau's done with it, or our plan to axe the tax, say yes to green energy projects that actually lower emissions, and not punish Canadians for heating their homes, buying groceries, and not sending jobs and investment over to China, where they emit at much higher levels with much lower environmental standards.
Ms. Collins, I want to get you in on this, and more specifically, I imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to support the Liberals in this motion as your agreement stipulates, and your support of the price on carbon stipulates as well. I mentioned a long list of NDP politicians in this country to Mr. Van Koeverden who are opposed to the consumer side of this carbon tax. They are not unserious about the damages that are brought on by climate change, but Premier Canoe, Ms. Notley, everyone vying to replace her. Carla Beck, the leader of the NDP in Saskatchewan, the leader of the NDP in Nova Scotia yesterday, supported the government on a resolution. Why is your party so out of line with your provincial counterparts?
I mean, I don't think that we are. Honestly, you can see in British Columbia a strong price on carbon. You can also see Wobb's comments were to say that we need to look at this. And I think it's fair for provinces to look at it. Quebec has a cap and trade system. Hearing my Conservative colleague unable to answer whether he would scrap the industrial side of this carbon pricing system, that means the Conservatives actually want to let the biggest polluters keep polluting. I don't think that the Liberals have put forward a ideal system. In my ideal world, and I've said this many times in the House of Commons, we would strengthen the industrial side. We would make the biggest polluters pay more to make sure that we can support everyday Canadians who are struggling. We see 2 parties who always have the backs of rich CEOs in the oil and gas industry over everyday Canadians. We want a windfall tax on oil and gas. We want to make sure the output-based pricing system, which is the industrial carbon pricing system, is strengthened. Right now, Suncor pays 14 times less than an average Canadian for the pollution that they're putting out.
So be explicit about what your position is, though, for average Canadians. Do you support that the carbon tax is applied on the consumer side, that it will increase every April 1st, despite what every New Democrat, aside from Premier Eby, is saying?
So I definitely don't support the Conservatives' plan to scrap everything. I think that the Liberals should reassess. I think they should look at making sure that polluters are actually paying their fair share. Carbon pricing is an important part of a climate plan. For the Liberals, it actually makes up 1/3 of their emissions reduction plan. I think we could actually invest billions of dollars into climate solutions if we didn't spend it on things like Trans Mountain, $34 billion.
Do I take from your comments, though, that you would like to see the industrial side strengthened and keep the consumer side, or scrap the consumer side if it can be made up on the industrial side?
And ensure that we're actually supporting Canadians at a level that will make a difference. Right
But
now,
what's the answer to that?
Yeah, so right now, the Liberals are giving rebates back. Galen Weston gets the same rebate as someone making $20,000. That doesn't seem like a fair system.
So let's vote against it. Let's vote against their plan.
I will continue to vote against Conservatives since you have no climate plan.
But you will support the motion today. You're not going to vote against the government, correct?
I will not support the motion today.
Okay.
They want Jagmeet Singh wants Justin Trudeau to stay in power. He wants Justin Trudeau to be Prime Minister. So Canadians who are tired of what Justin Trudeau has done to Canada after 8 years with higher costs, increased crime, and housing crisis.
I have time for one more round.
The NDP want that to continue.
Mr. Van Koeverden, to Ms. Collins' point around strengthening the industrial side of the carbon tax, again, you could do that and not levy the consumer side. Why are you so wedded to it? If you can escape the political damage and the opposition from everywhere across the country and still get the same impact on reducing emissions?
Well, we have a plan to reduce emissions, and emissions are down since 2015. It's important to note that emissions were going in the wrong direction when this government was elected in 2015, and the policies that we put in place have turned the tide.
Well, now, at first, what turned the tide was the pandemic.
COVID and the aftermath.
To be fair, but now, yes, they are.
In 2019, Andrew Scheer ran his entire failed leadership campaign on a promise to increase emissions. People said that he was oil and gas's secret weapon in the government. I did not say that. I might repeat it.
I mean, your government bought the pipeline.
It's true. He continues to be oil and gas's best friend
up here in
Parliament. And Canadians just can't trust Conservatives with anything with respect to the environment. His plan was to increase emissions. That's how the Conservatives would like to tackle climate change.
What does Trans Mountain do? Increase production and increase emissions?
Well, no, I'm not. Look, Trans Mountain Pipeline is one issue entirely. If you want to get into how we get oil and gas to Tidewater, it's a lot less carbon intensive than taking it on trucks or a train. But
okay, you agree on one thing, then maybe the two of you. Look,
I disagree with pipelines, but also at the same time, I disagree with Conservatives that increasing pipelines, more pipelines. I disagree with Andrew Scheer and his party's position to increase emissions in Canada. Canada has the opportunity to lead in the world on the fight against climate change, and we're doing that right now. And they want to derail all of it while taking checks away from people who need it the most.
Okay, Mr. Scheer, I do want to get back to it because you did not answer the question about whether your government will, or your party, pardon me, if it forms government, will support an industrial or keep an industrial carbon tax. I think it's a fair question to ask, and I don't understand why you can't answer it.
No, it's just a matter of when our leader unveils his environment plan, he'll address all of that. Obviously, the previous Conservative government signed on to ambitious targets that had measures to ensure that industrial emitters paid their fair share and took meaningful measures to reduce those emissions. I should point out that Mr. Vancouver's party issued a special exemption to large emitters when they brought in the carbon tax, meaning that individual consumers who are going in to buy groceries and to pay their heating bill had to pay more. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy that he sits here today trying to use this attack when his own government passed this special exemption.
But you're criticizing without saying what you do.
He says Canada's leading the world. The Climate Change Performance Index shows that after Justin Trudeau raised his carbon tax, Canada fell 4 spots. They're now 62 out of 67 behind Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Algeria.
We are on track to meet the 2030 target.
But that is
absolutely on target.
They are trying to take credit for the pandemic and the aftermath of that and say, that's why emissions are going down. In reality, they're going all in on a failed policy, and Canadians can't afford it. 1 million Canadians are going to the food bank for the first time in their lives. Let's talk about the human misery.
He's tying the affordability crisis to the pricing carbon, which is false.
I understand. Hold on. We got to
Canadians
finish.
are suffering at unprecedented levels, and that matters. And Justin Trudeau, during this time, is saying, you know what, you're going to have to pay more. You have to pay 23% more coming April 1st.
One second. I think to both your points, I understand this. I understand the point.
Using poor people as a wedge against climate policy is disgraceful.
Making people suffer more for a failed plan is worse.
You have to listen to me right now. I apologize, but there's a way to discern through what you're both saying. I think that it is fair to say that Canadians are incredibly hurting. Those numbers at the food bank are absolutely accurate. Does the carbon tax add something to their cost of living depending on their income? Yes, it does. It does, according to, if you take into account the economic impact. Is it as much as the Conservatives are presenting? No, it is not. It is not the total complete factor in how much we're paying for everything, but it's not nothing. No, you can't, because we got to go on. You guys have been interrupting each other and me all the time. Ms. Collins, the last word goes to you. your position seems a little bit difficult to discern for me. You want the Liberals to do more on the industrial side, but you'll continue to support the consumer side, but maybe you can see them reassess. How are Canadians supposed to understand where your party actually stands?
We absolutely support carbon pricing as one tool in the toolbox, and the industrial side needs to be strengthened. We need to make the biggest polluters pay more and give more breaks to everyday Canadians. But we do not support a party with no climate plan. We don't support motions.
I think it's clear you don't support the Conservatives, but I'm trying to discern how you're different at all from the Liberals. And from what you're saying, it sounds like you approach it in exactly the same way.
We would approach it in a different way. We would make sure that the biggest polluters, Suncor, the other oil and gas giants, actually do their fair share. Not only would we ensure that output-based pricing, the industrial carbon price, is increased for those companies, we would also make sure there is a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. We would also make sure that we stop handing out billions of dollars to fossil fuel companies who are making record profits.
So no carbon capture.
We wouldn't have bought the $35 billion pipeline. We would have invested that money in climate solutions.
Okay, I gotta go. I'm out of time. I've already gone way long. I appreciate all of you making time for the discussion. As always, Laurel Collins, Andrew Scheer, and Adam Van Koeverden. We will be right back with our front bench. We're gonna talk about the politics behind all of this next.